All right, good morning, Internet. It's Friday, October 7th, and this is the JupyterLab weekly meeting. Today we have a short meeting. We have a bunch of our team out in New York working around Strata and some other development work that we have going on there with Bloomberg and Microsoft. It sounds like today Ian might have a few questions for the JupyterLab team or an update on the work that he's been doing. Feel free to...
Sure. Just very briefly to give an update, I've been plugging away at getting a proof of concept for real-time collaboration going. At the moment, I have it set up so I can collaborate with myself. So that seems like real progress. Which is to say, I can open up two separate web browsers and have strings mirrored between them through the Google APIs. But one of the questions that I've been having right now, I've just sort of been hacking things in, as necessary. So there isn't really a whole lot of structure in where I've been making changes. So one of the questions I have for the people who are more familiar with the architecture of JupyterLab is, how do we see this fitting into the overall structure? Is this the type of thing which is better off as a extension in some way? It'd be a fairly involved extension, or is this something that should be sort of a first-class part of the architecture of the system, where I would actually have my fingerprints all over the thing. In particular, there are places where I have to load various APIs and get them initialized. Is that something that would happen at the top level of sort of the lab application? And there are edits that I need to make to the document model if I want to have strings, if I want to have, there's a string that's enabled for real-time collaboration. So all these are kind of vague at the moment. I've just sort of been putting them in as necessary. But at some point,
I think what would be conceptually an interesting idea to see if it's possible to structure it this way, because in my mind it would be the cleanest way to go about it, is that if we could have an extension or a plugin like any other thing in JupyterLab that provides an abstract API for real-time collaboration that could then be implemented by various extensions, because we can't always use the Google real-time API. Like that won't work for certain people in certain situations. So if we could come up with a sufficiently abstract API which we can define through interfaces and then have as an extension that's available with like some default implementation, let's say it's Google's or whatever, and then we can go back and update our document models for like the text editor and the notebook and that sort of thing to then consume these APIs as necessary. Or maybe we have like a real-time version of the notebook that instead of having a regular notebook model has like a real-time notebook model that depends on these implementations of this of that real-time API interface. And so if we can get that to work, and if there's a way to sufficiently abstract over Google's real-time APIs such that it could be implemented by other real-time API systems, then I think that would be the way to go about it. And then once we have that, then we can see about how the best way to incorporate that into the text editors and into the notebooks, whether it's just baking it in by default, which my gut is telling me is the wrong solution, because if you just want like a localized notebook, then we can make that like more efficient without using some stuffed out real-time API. So maybe we have like a notebook widget and a real-time notebook widget that hooks up to these APIs. And then a text editor and a real-time text editor, that sort of thing. So that like on the surface, that's how my gut's telling me that it should be structured at a high level. Of course, it's going to be more complex once we get into the details. But that's kind of the view I would take if I was starting out on something like this.
Sure. So the drawback, or at least a wrinkle with that, and I overall agree with you, and I think that sounds sensible. One wrinkle with that is that it would be nice to have a easy way to switch back and forth between, for instance, just a real-time text editor and a local text editor. Because if I just start out writing something and then I want to bring somebody else on, I don't want to have some sort of clunky conversion step. I want to be able to smoothly say, I want to bring you onto this document that I'm writing. So at least having some way to have them be sufficiently similar that I can easily switch back and forth, even if they're under the hood, given by separate representations, separate document models?
Yeah, and so that'll be interesting, and we're going to need to see what the interplay is between, like, how much does the widget need to know about whether something is real time versus whether something is, for lack of a better term, just a dumb data model. Because certain things like this can get tricky, and sometimes the widget does need more information about, like, it needs more detailed information about the data model in order to do things like efficiently and well. And so there's maybe one of those cases where we can't fully abstract away like this sort of data model interaction from the widget, in which case then what we can do is we can just swap out the widget at runtime. Like, you take your text editor widget and it's local, and I want to morph this into a real-time editor or something like that. And so we just swap out the widget under the hood and basically load what was in the old text editor into the real-time text editor. So there are ways around that, and which one we choose or which approach we choose is really going to depend on. We'll have to decide that when we get there, basically.
So at least, and so just to, because I think this conversation happened offline, I spoke to Steve and Jason, and they encouraged me to make at least the initial changes that I've been making in the document model rather than at the editor widget level.
That's how I would start. That's good advice. That's where I would start. The thing that I worry about is there are very subtle interactions, like handling multiple selections or cursor inputs or those sorts of things that could be handled much more efficiently and cleanly if the widget knows that it's dealing with a real-time model. And abstracting that away, that sort of information away to where the document model doesn't know whether it's real-time or whether it's not real-time, can be difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it can be difficult, and we won't know which way we need to go until we actually get in there and start implementing. But I do think that was the right advice in terms of where to start.
Yep. Okay, so I'll aim at figuring out some sort of abstract API then that at least further down the road will be able to be subscribed to by various different APIs. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, what else? What else do we have? Darian, anything you want to share with the group or the world?
No, I don't really have much to report this week. I've been working on outstanding issues, and I'm in the middle of filing an issue, but that'll be out there for people to see. I don't need to talk about anything.
Okay, great. Steve?
About the same, just trying to keep up with outstanding issues for the 0.9 milestone. Released 0.5 this morning, but the remaining major hurdle feature-wise is getting lab extensions to work across different versions of JupyterLab and Phosphor and rectifying all that. So we're working on that internally, a solution to that. Waiting to talk to Jason about that, but he's been meeting with others this week, including today. So hopefully we'll make some progress next week on that front. That's it.
Cool. Can you guys update the HackPad either now or after the meeting? I'm trying to take some notes, but might not be catching it all. Great. So then, Chris, you're the last one here. Anything you want to share with the group or the folks online?
No, not particularly. Not related to JupyterLab.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for showing up, and hopefully we'll have a fuller team next week, but it's good to see you all. Have a great weekend.